welcome. Officially episode 1 of the Give 'em Liam podcast. Thanks for joining me. I'm Liam, as you probably know. This episode I'm really excited about. Lydia Williams is joining the show. For those of you who don't know Lydia, she has been the Matilda's goalkeeper for, I think, 16 years now. 97 caps for the Matildas. So, you know, one of the few people who's going to likely bring up that 100 cap figure. But look, before we get into any of that, got to do some shout outs, got to do some thank yous. Cover Podcast Network. I'm wearing the shirt today. It's backwards, but whatever. Cover Podcast Network. They are the people who make all of this happen. So if you can, head across to thecover.com.au, subscribe to their newsletter, have a look at the columns, have a look at some of the podcasts on there. There's always some good stuff. Shouts to the Daily Dribble guys. Shouts to Tobias Canning with his NRL NRL column. I do a column, although I haven't been super active recently. My column is going to change from a rugby column more to a pop culture column. So probably look at things like the Genius documentary, Kanye's new doco. Anything that kind of captures my attention. I hate to admit, I do watch a lot of TV and a lot of documentaries. So that's one thing to do there. The other thing I want you to do is at Give 'em Liam on Instagram. That's where all the information for this podcast, clips, social graphics, whatever, that's all going to be on there. So after round 1 of Super Rugby, we did pick an Australian team of the week, and it was a bit different to the team I thought I would pick. I have to admit, I didn't factor Jock Campbell in at all to the red side. So to see him play as well as he did in the number 15 jumper, maybe we're talking about him playing fullback for the Wallabies and not Kurtley Beale or Tom Banks. Yeah, you heard it here first. He was fantastic, and I think the real flow on there is Jordan Petaia. There was all that chat about him moving to fullback, and I don't see how you can do that now. I really don't. So anyway, head there, have a look at that team, tell us what you think, follow us, subscribe, and yeah. So without further ado, without any more preamble, ramble, whatever, here is my conversation with Lydia Williams. Lydia Williams, thank you so much for joining the show. I guess at the top of the show, how you doing?
Oh, good. I mean, yeah, happy to be here. A little bit cold, but that's about it.
How is life in London? Obviously the cold, but also, it's a little bit out of control with all the COVID stuff and all that. So how's been navigating that?
Yeah, it's been a bit crazy. Obviously, the first last year when we first got here, it was in major lockdown. So, that was interesting. And then they kind of went out of it and then went right back into it. Only this year, really, or a little bit of last year, were everything becoming back open again, and markets and concerts and everything. So it's still getting back to a little bit of normal life, but yeah, got a little bit to go.
And how has that impacted your training? In terms of the certain things you can do. Were you guys put into a high performance bubble as well?
Yeah, we were pretty, I guess, locked up, so to say. So I mean, everyone's like, what have you been doing on the weekends or when you have days off? We're like, nothing. I can't even say hello to anyone who's random on the street because you're just, well. Yeah, but it got to a point where we're doing, 2 PCRs a week, lateral flows in between, at the height of basically what COVID was. Where now it's just, as long as you can travel and fly and produce a negative, everyone's double vaxxed and boosted up. So really it's kind of like you've done all you can. So whatever happens, happens.
And that's the hard thing, right? We've all done the right thing, or most people have done the right thing. They've got got the double vax and got the boosters. And as you say, what will happen will happen, because that's all we can really do to arm ourselves at this point.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's it. Like, you followed all the rules, you did everything right. So really, it's kind of just like, yeah, you can't do anything more.
Yeah, yeah. So, when you got to London, you mentioned you were straight into a bubble, into lockdown. Was that hard? Obviously being from Australia and spending, most of your life in Australia, to get to London, where not only are you away from your family, but you're also then isolated from, most of your teammates most of the time.
Yeah, I think the hardest part about it was actually not doing anything in Australia.
Yeah, yeah.
So everyone else was, doing stuff, but we were like post-season, trying to stay fit. When are we going to go? And at that time, it was actually really hard to leave Australia. You had to get, the government's permission and produce all these files. So, but then you couldn't go to the embassies. So you're doing everything via email and like calls and everything like that. So that was probably the hardest part. Actually going over and being part of a team again was exciting.
Yeah.
And that was pretty easy, but the actual process to leave the country and to, spend 2 months post-season before that was the hardest part.
Yeah, it's interesting. My sister she's only in New Zealand. She lives in New Zealand, but she was in Australia when some things popped off, and then for her to get home, for her, New Zealand is home.
That would have been hard.
Such a nightmare, yeah.
It ended up being crazy.
Yeah, and it's just, I guess, you can't really fault anything that the government's done in that regard, because how could we have been prepared for something on that scale?
Oh, yeah, and all the, COVID tests that you need to do and the results. I mean, obviously you saw with all the rapids, just trying to find them, when the surge was. It's just, as it happened and hit Australia, we had no PCR tests.
Nah.
I mean, the funniest thing, when we actually got to London, they had like our schedules or what's happening, and we're like, we land and we go straight into testing. And normally for us, it's like, whenever I see testing, it's, beep tests and jumps and all this stuff. We're like, why would we be doing tests? And it was just PCR tests.
It's funny, I was working with a WNBL club, the UC Capitals, and the league brought in all these testing protocols, which was really good, commending the league. Mm-hmm. But then myself, the operations manager, and 2 of the assistant coaches had to drive all around Canberra to every pharmacy in Canberra, just trying to get PCR tests so that we could do the mandated test, because all of the tests that the league had bought were stuck in quarantine in Sydney. So it was just like a complete nightmare.
No way.
Yeah, and then
I think that's bad. It was like, it's in Australia, like you can't even
you can't even use them. And then they went down to, I think it was Ballarat, and we had just enough tests to get them there. So then the guys who travelled with the team had to do that whole thing again while they were in Ballarat.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
And in Ballarat too. They've been going, trying to find every little country town that has anything.
Yeah. So, that I guess from our end, like, that's been a huge challenge. And I assume many Australian sports are sort of in the same boat, just trying to find the tests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. It's just difficult, but I mean, we're kind of end of that now.
Yeah.
A lot of places in Europe don't require that anymore. So, it's kind of starting to ease off, I think. Yeah.
No, it's good. And, I've definitely heard stories and things, from overseas leagues where, WNBL is a really good example, where they were just sort of rescheduling games. But, I've seen over there that if you have, if someone tests positive, it's just that player's out for the game and you continue. So there's a minimum number of players you have to continue. And I've definitely seen that in the Women's Super League as well, where, players are just out because they have COVID and we kind of just move on.
Yeah, basically, close contacts, and then it's kind of like, as long as you produce a negative, like the day after, it's kind of like, okay, you're all right.
in your 16 years, 17 years almost at the top of this sport, did you ever think you'd play in an environment like this?
Oh, no way. I don't even think, like, you think of, like, people talking about, like, Spanish flu and, all that kind of stuff. You're like, oh, the hardest thing I have to do is, I beat jet lag, basically. And then all of a sudden it's like the world got turned upside down and you're like, I need to find a PCR. I need to make sure it's 48 hours. I need to, wear masks all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever we used to travel over to Asia and into China and everything, obviously with, SARS and the bird flu, everyone wore a mask and we're like, we don't need that. And then now all of a sudden, look at everyone wearing masks.
Yeah, even in Canberra now, you can't get into most places unless you're wearing a mask. So it's just...
Yeah.
And Canberrans have been really, really cool in that they've really followed every rule. I think we're like 98.5% double vaxxed and booster now. So, and then everyone, as you say, everyone's just cruising around in masks. And, in an interesting way, it's kind of opened up like an accessory business for people who are just, hand sewing masks, making, nice patterns and that kind of thing. You want the most bling and bougie mask now.
When you see like all the designers having like Gucci and like Louis Vuitton masks, I'm like, okay, it's getting wild.
It's getting out of control,
Yeah.
And I guess you talked about jet lag. So, how are you feeling after that trip to India for the Asia Women's Cup?
Yeah, that wasn't actually too bad in terms of, jet lag and the travel. We obviously had a pre-camp in Dubai, which is not too many hours difference from Australia and in Europe. So that was easy. And then kind of going from Dubai to India, that was only a couple hours. So having that really helped us and not the big hit of jet lag all at once. And then the trip itself, obviously, we wanted to do, finish in we wanted to win the thing and be in the final. So obviously that's disappointing to go out, the way we did. But, at the end, it was a great strike. It's like one of those games where it's just like they had, one chance to put it away.
And they did.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes, you feel like, you're on top and things just aren't going your way. It happens in every sport. And then, as you say, it was just an incredible strike. They put it away and sometimes that's just the way it goes.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like, there's so much analysing that goes into sport as a team. But then obviously, like, people looking in and, family and friends and everything. And, I think it was just a day that we lost a game.
Yeah.
So... Yeah, it's just a weird one. Just sometimes you're on top and, the ball doesn't go in the back of the net and then, it just doesn't work out the way that you wanted.
But I think the pleasing thing is there were some really good performances. There were really good passages. It kind of looks like you're building, and we all know that we've got the World Cup here in Australia next year. So is that kind of the thought process within the group? Is yes, we're disappointed here, but let's continue to build on the good stuff and work on some of the stuff we need to work on to make sure we're peaking for that tournament.
Yeah, I think, going into tournaments versus games is a little different.
Yep.
So it was good to see that, now we have a bit more of a rotation of, girls that can play and be a part of the squad, which, obviously is building the depth within the team. It builds... different chemistry and different lineups and different, formations that we can play. And then, at the end of the day, it's, 2023. So we have, a bit over a year now to kind of prepare for that, with different things. But to kind of get our first taste at a tournament quite early so we can now prepare, I think that was a good thing and good sign to kind of see where we're at and then how do we knuckle down for, the next year and so.
Yeah, because it's really interesting you mentioned the, tournament versus game thing, because that doesn't happen in a lot of sports. In rugby, for example, we get a World Cup every 4 years, but there's not really tournament-style play in between. And even then, you're still getting, I think the minimum is 6 days between games. You guys were backing up, 2 days, 2-day turnaround. So what are the key differences in terms of, you mentioned squad rotation, but, do you go into each game with a different, or in tournament, do you go into each game with a different formation in mind, depending on who you're playing or different personnel? Or is it more of an overall, like, here's the way that we want to play and the things that we want to execute, and, maybe we make some adjustments on the fly depending on what they show us?
I think, going into tournaments, you kind of have a I guess, an overarching like theme that you stick with for every game. And then, you know, there'll be different, you know, I guess either formations or tactics for that exact opponent. But really kind of way that you play that's how you play for the whole tournament. Whereas games, you can kind of experiment. You know, we're going to play this formation. We're going to play this person here. We're going to, you know, press for the first 5 minutes. We're going to sit back and see what happens. So I think, you know, tournament mode, the information it is quite extensive, but it also is very kind of clear. And just, you know, kind of to the point, this is what we're doing. So then the next game, we'll add this because it's a different opponent, but we're still doing the basics. So yeah, it's a little bit different in terms of like the information that you get, but you almost have to kind of however you last played or how you prepared, you continue that and build onto the next game.
Yeah, and then hope that by the time you get to a final or get to the pointy end of the tournament, you're really hitting your straps in terms of the way you're playing, and you're just adjusting to what they're giving you effectively.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
And then within that, you know, I think goalkeeping to me is like it's like a dark art almost. You know, it's
it's kind of sounds like spooky or something like that. A little bit of voodoo there.
But you know, like I liken it to playing in the front row in rugby union. You know, it's a really specialised position, and there are a lot more things that happen and that you're in charge of and that you do than just, you know, for props. It's, you know, packing scrums is sort of the one thing, making sure you can bring the ball back for your backs, for your fancy guys to score points. And for fans, you don't actually notice those guys until you've got a bad one who can't do that job. And I think in a way goalkeeping is much the same in that, you know, you can have these, you know, you can have a string of clean sheets and then you let in 3 goals and you're the worst person in the world. And it's like, guys, I just went on a 5-game clean sheet streak. Like, break.
Yep, basically, it's brutal. It's definitely brutal. That's what it is. Yeah. I don't know who would want to do that.
And, you know, and I guess, you know, looking at it too, it looks like you guys have a really important role in terms of organising the defensive unit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bare bones of what goalkeeping is what it is, you know, 200 years ago or, how, you know, ages ago, which is basically saving the ball at the back of the net. So at the end of the day, that's basically what it is. And then there's all these added, you know, communication, how good your feet are, how good your distribution is, you know, crossing, all these kind of things that have been added onto that. So to have all attributes, I mean, it's pretty impossible, I think, for all athletes in whatever sport they are to have every single attribute that defines that player or that position. So I think goalkeeping's the same. It's almost like, what are you good at that you know that you can kind of excel at? And maybe don't have to work too hard because it's a natural talent. But then what are the things that are going to get you, you know, equal to someone who that talent is their strength and that's your weakness. So how do you kind of build that into your game to make you more well-rounded and, you know, develop into what the team needs?
And so is goalkeeping always something you did, you know, from a young age, or were you a midfielder at one point and just moved back there and fell in love, or?
Oh, no way. Well, when I moved to Canberra when I was 11. And I was playing like everywhere. I was playing in WA, so there was really no football there. It was AFL, maybe cricket. And then, you know, I did a little bit of softball, basketball. That was about it. And for me, it was like, okay, so we moved over to Canberra. There's no AFL, so that was out of the question. So really, it was basketball and football. And then I was too short for a basketballer, even though, you know, 5'9", but, you know, I'm not going to be a good point guard because there's better ones out there. So really football was it. And I came late to registration. I think we came in late April.
So season would have been just underway.
So I missed all the registrations and I felt like, okay, well, you can join Tuggeranong. but you can be in Division 5
Yeah.
and play wherever, or you can be in Division 1 and the only position left is a goalkeeper. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, we'll rotate because
Yeah.
that's what I've been doing.
Yep.
And then I never rotated. I think I rotated for one game.
Yeah.
And then one of the girls came back the next and they're like, okay, she's back, like, she's back in. I'm like, what? I thought we were, like, changing this up. So, yeah, that was it. It was basically, like,
Yeah.
forced goalkeeping.
But, and then, getting an opportunity with that AIS program, obviously some years later, and I imagine you look back and you reflect on that moment and go, wow, imagine if they'd said the only position available was, on the right wing or up front.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely can't run fast, so that right wing would have lasted about 5 years and then it was gone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, kind of funny how it all worked out. And then, they put me in touch with a goalkeeping coach, which I was like, oh, there's an actual coach for just my position.
Yeah.
And then it kind of developed from there, and I started training at the AIS, and, the girls at the time, they always had camps there.
Mm.
And so the coach, which was Tom Samani, he just saw me whilst I was training there, and obviously the amount of camps, he was like, oh, she's improving and doing good. And he just invited me into camp, and I had no idea what the Matildas were, or who they were.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. And then that was it.
But, football is amazing in how there are, there's not the sort of traditional state body run or national body run. I mean, they exist, those programs, those coaching programs. But there are so many amazing sort of private coaches, position-specific coaches. I've met with the guys from Coerva before who run that, really targeted at little kids. But it's an amazing sport in the way that it identifies talent at a really young age and really invests and tries to develop that talent over a long period.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you come over to Europe and when you, like, even Japan, they have, like, 10-year programs that, that is like, okay, we're going to get a kid that's 3, develop them, and then by the time they're 13, they're into, X Academy, Y Academy, into this national team. So they have all these development tools and plans throughout, like, just even club.
Yeah.
Like, some of these kids are playing club and, you're 16 and, like, you're already playing like that.
Yeah.
But, they've been doing that since they were 4 from, like, private coaches and that. So, it's not out of the norm here.
Yeah.
And seeing it. But then when you go back home, you're like, it's really cool that it's starting to pick up there and there's a lot more jobs and opportunity and people getting out there for it.
Yeah, and I think that the best thing about it as a sport holistically is all you really need is a ball or something that resembles a ball, and and you can play. My partner's Chilean, so they're obviously football mad in Chile.
Oh yeah,
and
they are.
Yeah, and her family's from a town just outside of Santiago called San Antonio, and it's it's sort of like a concrete jungle almost. And we were walking through one day, and there were these kids in a like a sort of a multi-purpose concrete court. So it had basketball hoop, but it was kind of dilapidated. And they built this out of like plumbing pipe, 2 goals.
Oh wow!
And they had they just had like a like one of those sort of soft balls that you'd buy a little kid to play with, but it was sort of soccer ball sized or football sized. So I saw that and I was like, oh, I'm going to go buy them a football. So I went into town and bought them a football, took it down to the court, gave it to them, and within 10 minutes there was 40 kids down there because they saw the actual football.
The actual football. Yeah. Wow.
So it was so cool just to see that and just to see, all these kids, they just loved it. They loved it so much. And to the point where they built themselves a makeshift goal or 2 makeshift goals.
It's honestly crazy. Like, I think sport just has like such a unique way of like bringing people together, and especially kids.
Yeah.
Like when we were in Rio and we would drive to training, and around the like favelas and everything, you'd see like, a makeshift like court and Brazilian little kids playing like on futsal like places. And Even when we were just in India, there were, along the back streets, like kids they put concrete slabs and just had a stick and playing cricket.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So, and you're just like, they just find so much joy in the little things, and then you're like, wonder why they're good at that. Like,
yeah,
they just learn it from such a young age as a passion, and then kind of go on from there.
And without any of the the traditional resources that someone like me, I was sort of gifted everything coming through the rugby pathway, but they really fall in love with the game without ever even having played it in an organised way, which I think is so special.
Oh yeah, it's definitely like, it's just, you just see kids light up whenever they're like, the Olympics. I mean, we all kind of, I guess, stop and wait for, the Olympic Games and seeing all these people come on, and you're like, that's cool. And then, like, it just is sport's just, like, so amazing how it can bring people together.
Yeah. And even, I sort of I joked with my partner the other day, like, the Winter Olympics obviously on at the moment, and she walked in and I was watching it, and she's like, didn't the Olympics just finish? Like, yeah, this is...
No one really, there we go. No one knows about the Winter Olympics if you don't live in snow.
Yeah. And I was like, no, this is the cold one, Kat. This is...
the cold Olympics, yeah.
Sport is... And I guess this is part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast and reached out to you is, it has this way of bringing people from really unique backgrounds together and for a singular purpose. I can't tell you how many kids I played with and guys I played with throughout my life who came from, such unique and in lots of instances really tough backgrounds and upbringings, but their football, their sport was their vehicle to kind of escape all of that and try and find a better life for themselves and their families. So it's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, there's the amount of people that you meet through it and like have gone through either, tough times in injury or in trying to even make it or pay for things. But I think everyone has a story when it comes to sport. To get to the top, there's something that they've gone through to make them be the best at that or excel in that. So yeah, when you hear that, then you're like, oh, that makes sense, or that's what drives you.
Because you kind of have to have a little bit of... You have to be a bit obsessive, in my view, and you kind of you do have to be selfish, and you have to sacrifice a lot of stuff to get to the top of your game, as you would know, and often there's a catalyst for that. Something happens, and then it's like a refocusing moment where look at Ash Barty as an example. Sort of step back and really reflected on whether this is what she wanted to do, and like now look at her, she's incredible.
Oh yeah, it's honestly, I think everyone just has that like aha moment where, either they realize this is what they want to do, or this is what, the different path that they want to go down, or whatever it is. But I think at that aha moment is when, sporting people make that change to like, I'm excelling now.
And I'm going to commit myself 100% to this pursuit, even if people think it's crazy.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Always crazy. Yeah. Oh, you're missing my 21st? Or, you're missing this holiday? I have to.
Yeah, I actually don't have a choice.
Yeah, I don't. I have to. Yeah. It's not even a question anymore.
And, I think when I look at your career, you came in at such a young age and really when, the W League or A-League women now was really at its infancy. And you've kind of seen, the growth in terms of the professionalism and all of that, which, I feel like is now culminated in what's happening in Europe with the Women's Super League and the Champions League. What are some of the big things that you've seen change in sort of the 16, 17 years that you've been involved at the top?
Oh, gosh. Like the biggest thing is obviously like participation and viewership and that kind of thing. Like that's just, the amount of coverage just TV gives is like insane. And then, on top of that, then there's social media and, news outlets and everything like that is kind of just like, it's everywhere now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in terms of, I guess, like federations and clubs and presidents, they're actually giving female footballers like a chance.
Yep.
They're going, oh, you know what? They're actually pretty good with that. Now we'll like give this or we'll build that or like, you know, this is your field or this is professional. This is the standards that we want to do. And, you know, I think a lot more countries are now having their own like PFA or a players union.
Yeah, yep.
That will do the fighting for them. So I think that's the exciting thing is that there's actually people that aren't involved in the sport directly and aren't the athletes that are actually using their time and creating, you know, a platform to do, you know, I don't even know, legal stuff or professional things or just, you know, like mental health or, you know, education, just something that they're like, you know, we need to really kind of invest into these women, basically.
And certainly from my perspective, there are so many more people, good people, involved in women's sport. And you know, the player association stuff you talk about, that's really important for a couple of reasons. But the biggest one is to really allow the players to play and let the Players Association to provide that advocacy. You know, if the players aren't happy, rather than going directly to their club or to their president or, you know, to their federation, who technically employs them, there is actually an outlet to go, hey, these are some things that we're not happy with. You know, can you provide some advocacy for us? And, you know, I think just to have that is really, really important and a huge step forward in professionalism just generally.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're not, like, most of us are either studying, have studied, but have never gone into, you know, what is your, you know, career post-sport. Or, you know, if you were going to be a lawyer, you still have to do, you know, 4 or 5 years. And that time when you're playing, it's very part-time. So, like, you actually don't have much experience in corporate world or professional world. So having like a players union or people that do have that experience to kind of fight for you. Yeah. Like you don't really feel too dumb when you say something and you're like, oh, that didn't make sense. And then they're like, no, we know what you're talking about. And you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, you can say that professionally.
But you know, it is hard. And for a lot of people, it's really confronting retiring from your sport. You know, one of my good friends played a lot of Super Rugby, made a lot of money, and then took about a $450,000 pay cut because he had to become a sunglasses salesman because he didn't study and he didn't, you know. So for him, it was such a because it was gone like that. You know, it was one day he had a contract, the next day he didn't, and then all of a sudden he had to go and get a job. So to have and look to his detriment, he didn't really utilise any of the services that were available to him. But it made it, you know, just as confronting for him because all of a sudden he has this lifestyle. He has, you know, he had people who depended on him, and then all of that money was gone, and he had to do his regular 9 to 5 selling sunglasses. Yeah,
honestly, it's just like when you get to that point, it's just like honestly. Just hearing stories like that, especially in like, you know, the men's game, where there is so much money and so much, you know, income in there that it can change quite quickly. I mean, I've just kind of gone through a couple of friends like here and they're like, the PFA here offers, you know, kind of transition and networking opportunities. And so it's kind of nice seeing like how they're offering that to the females and, you know, they're all kind of like, yeah, we need to kind of look at that and, you know, make a plan for post-career basically.
Yeah. And one thing I've certainly noticed working with female athletes is, you know, you guys really care about your sport and you want to develop your sport and you want to be involved in that. But then you guys really do seem to have a more cerebral approach to your sport. And maybe that's because part of it is forced in that, you know, not all leagues at the moment are fully professional, so you do have to have a job and you do have to have study interests. But, you know, certainly from where I sit working with female rugby athletes, you know, they're all super interested in you know, being involved with causes or being involved with businesses that are around around the sport. You know, even to the point where a lot of them work as development officers for their state bodies. You know, developing the game, which I think is you know, it's just so much better than the men, because the men, in my view, are just so far removed from that grassroots growth part because they've just been in high performance pathways their whole lives.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I totally agree. I think, you know, females, I mean, probably now the majority of female athletes in all sports, it's the leagues and federations and teams have gone from professional or semi-professional into professional or professional into high performance.
Yep.
So everyone's kind of been on some kind of ride.
Yep.
So they're kind of in some way appreciated what the past is and be like, okay, that's kind of cool. Like, how can we develop it further? Or, you know, I've gone to, you know, see this club and encourage these girls, saying that, you know, there is a pathway now for you and that kind of thing. So I think it's kind of like we're all gone through something like that. So it helps, you know, motivate us to give back to, you know, maybe the younger people or people that are just starting out, being like, okay, if this is like what it grows into in 5 years, imagine 10 years from now.
Yeah, and especially with all you guys who've been on that ride, you know, if you guys all stay involved, you know, I'm excited to see the acceleration of that growth, because you guys can provide the feedback. You guys have been through it. You know, yeah, this worked, this didn't. Like, let's learn from those mistakes and the things that worked and continue to grow this thing. Mm-hmm. Which I just think that's so cool, because, you know, when I look at my sport, rugby, part of the problem is that it's been controlled by the same people for so long, and unfortunately, it's gone backwards in the men's game in particular.
I mean, I think the good thing with the female athletes in general is we're all kind of like connected in a way. Like, and I guess most of our like social media, like we follow different sports and athletes, and like you'll see them, you know, at cafes in Australia or in different events. So like you kind of keep in touch with them and not just restricted to your own sport or even your own country. The amount of people that I've met at overseas and in different, you know, leagues in America and, you know, UK and in Europe, I'm like, you know, these are people that you kind of, if you needed anything, they'll do anything for you, or you can collaborate or whatever it is to kind of like have that, you know, sense of community, female athlete community, basically.
And I think social media plays such a huge role in that. In that, it, you know, it connects the world, and you know, for me as a fan, you know, it's a nice way for me to be able to feel like I'm involved in the club or with an athlete, because I can see what they're up to, I can see who they're engaging with, you know, I have an idea of what they're about in terms of, you know, the causes they support and all of that. You know, I think back to when I was a kid and we didn't have any of that. These athletes were like superheroes, because all you saw was what happened on TV or what happened on the field. So to, you know, and I guess the flow on, you know, to be able to meet someone and then keep in contact with them through Instagram or through Facebook Messenger or whatever, I think it's really special.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially athletes now have gone into what they're passionate about outside of their sport.
Yeah.
And social media obviously is like giving them a voice for that. It's still like a little bit of a, you know, I guess controversy when it's people think that they are just an athlete.
Yep.
And kind of put them in the box.
Yeah,
but,
the shut up and dribble thing.
Yeah. But, you know, seeing like just the things that, you know, they're being entrepreneurs and releasing clothing lines, releasing books, doing movies.
Yeah.
It's just actually really kind of exciting seeing that side of them, that like they aren't just, you know, what they train and what they eat and do on, you know, TV basically.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone is just their sport, right? You know, what gives me as someone who has, you know, a website and can type a few words, the right to have an opinion, but you, because you're an athlete, not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know. It's crazy. You get put in a box. It's like, yeah, it's insane. It's just a different job, basically.
Yeah, and I think, you know, in a lot of ways, athletes who do develop a platform and a big following, you know, if they want to to speak up about something, they should, because they have that platform and they can actually make an impact. It's just a shame that we have trolls, and we have, unfortunately, in the media we just have, headline grabs. People want to grab the headline.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just everything. You get put in the spotlight, and it's just free game now. Yeah, I think it's important, especially with social media and athletes. It's just who you surround yourself with.
Yep.
And who kind of like supports you. I think especially as you grow up, when you don't even hit that social media bang or whatever it is, the people that support you through that growth, I think that's, the ones that ultimately are the ones that you listen to.
Yeah, I heard this really funny story the other day. Fat Joe, the rapper, do you know Fat Joe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's a throwback. Wow.
So he said that he had about 11 or 12 guys that it might have been more, an entourage of say it's 20. And then one day he kind of just got sick of it. So he walked in and said, guys, there's nothing left. I'm broke. I'm done. Mm-hmm. And 4 guys stuck with him and said, well, if you're broke, we're broke. Like, we'll get through it. So he said, those are the guys who are still in my entourage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, funnily enough, those were the guys who were there at the start, who were there when I blew up, and were there when I was broke.
Oh, God. It's honestly like that. It's funny, like when I went back home for Christmas and saw like my friends from school that were there like before I even made Matilda's.
Yeah.
And the ones that, it's my 16th. I'm like, sorry, I'm going to like ACT training, whatever it is. And literally they don't care. Like they're just like, hey, what are you doing? Where'd you travel to?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So this is my baby. And like, I'm like, this is cool. I don't want to talk about football at all. I'm having so much fun.
Yeah. You're still just Lydia from school.
Yeah, basically, that's all it is. Lydia from school that lived, over the road from where we were. But lunchtimes we used to go sneak to my house and have, gosh, you remember, I think it were like Calippos or like toucan bars or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in summer we used to sneak over and go have it. So don't tell my teachers that.
That's funny. So, I know you mentioned earlier that you grew up or you moved from Adelaide. You grew up in Kalgoorlie, right?
Yeah, Kalgoorlie.
Yeah. So how did you end up in Canberra? Because that seems like just from one extreme to the other almost.
I literally, Kalgoorlie of red dirt and just like walking around barefoot and like 40 degrees.
Yeah.
To then Canberra. My mum actually got a job working at a Bible college over there.
Yeah.
In Warramanga.
Yep.
And so her and my dad, they went over, a couple months before to pick out houses.
Yeah.
And so, they ended up finding a really great house in Monash, and then basically it was the big move, and they told me that everything was set, and then they told me, and I think we're moving a month later, and I locked myself in my room, told them I hated them, didn't want to go. I'm like, what are you doing? Why? Like, I have to go to Canberra?
Yeah.
This is like all I've known in like the bush. And now I'm going to like another bush that is like not red dirt, is cold, and I don't know anybody.
Well, and now look at you, living in London.
Oh, I know.
Traveling.
Yeah, literally. Now Canberra's too small for me, and then I have to go to London.
But, I think that's the unique thing about, what you do for a living, but also playing in London and getting an opportunity to play in the Champions League. Like, I imagine you've seen some unbelievable cities and unbelievable places just purely because you're traveling there to play.
Oh, yeah, and you fly in and out. Like, you're in and out, you see something, and then the next day you're gone.
Yeah.
But, just to travel, you travel to Prague, you travel to Moscow.
Yeah.
You go to Wolfsburg, and then you're back and you're playing, up in Manchester the next day.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then, let alone, flying around if it's like a World Cup or anything like that, you travel to all these amazing cities and your families are there and, you kind of get to experience those big moments as well. So it's crazy. Like, I never thought I'd leave Kalgoorlie, leave Canberra, and then let alone here I am, still playing and traveling around the world.
with I imagine, a huge frequent flyer point number there somewhere.
Well, remember, Qantas has demolished everything after that 2-year break of no flying. So
very true.
I was not happy.
I remember when I was traveling around a lot, and I got, I think I got gold or whatever, so I got the Qantas Lounge, the free pass to the Qantas Lounge.
Perfect. That's
I
the
thought
best
I was
one.
a bowler.
That was the best, honestly.
Yeah.
You're like, travel. I was like, do more trips to like Sydney to Canberra, and then then back to Sydney to go to Perth, and then do that. I'm happy with that. That's fine.
But then I got home and I told my dad, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's cute," and he dropped his like platinum card down on the table.
All right, that's when you know.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, okay, all right, Dad." Oh dear. So I guess we haven't really talked enough about Arsenal yet, and how you guys are tracking. Like, obviously tracking really well, sitting at the top there. Mm-hmm. Chelsea sort of nipping at your heels, but what do you think is going to be key moving forward to continue to build on what you're doing and maintain that spot?
I mean, I think it's always hard when you get near the end of a season.
Yeah.
Where, especially our team is quite international.
Yep.
So all these, I think there was a FIFA window, and we didn't have anything. So there's literally 5 of us training out of a squad of 23. So
not ideal.
There's 16, 18 people not there.
Yeah.
So you have that when it's meant to be time off or a break or ease into something, and then you come back and you have to ramp it back up to play the league.
Yep.
So I think as it kind of does that and it goes further and further without, a mid-season break or the end of the year, there is injuries that, pop up, and tired, fatigued, drained, and it's just about how good can you manage that. And I think that's always like the difficulty in all teams, basically, as it goes on. Even in tournaments, like as you get into the tournament, how do you manage fatigue and tiredness and that kind of thing? So right now we're doing well. We've done really well with kind of managing that and people being honest with how you're feeling.
Yep.
And yeah, that's actually the hardest thing, to actually say, I need a break today and not feel like you're letting anyone down.
Yep. And I see that. I see that at all levels. Just some days you're not feeling it, and it could be for a number of reasons, or you're carrying an injury or whatever. And you're right. It is really hard to just say, "Hey, coach, I just need today off. Like, I'm happy. I'm happy to do something. I'm happy to get on the bike or whatever, but I just can't. I can't do it today." And I think, I think some of that comes down to the environment too, the environment that the club creates and the coach creates. Because I think sometimes, especially when you're a younger athlete, it's more of fear of the coach rather than thinking you're going to let the team down.
Yeah.
But it is hard. It's really hard to look at yourself and go, I'm injured, or I'm sore, or I'm just cooked. And it's really hard not to just push through, because that's just kind of what we've been conditioned to do.
Yeah, and especially, I guess you see it a lot in like NFL.
Yeah.
The amount of like people that play on with concussions, or, a broken this, or, I got winded, or whatever it is, bruised ribs or whatever, and the next week they're back playing.
Yep.
Just because they need to,
yep.
or they actually can't say no, because in fear of losing, spots or salaries or whatever it is. So it's very kind of, that's probably the hardest thing in sport, is like actually knowing when you need the break, or when you need to take responsibility of your own life and kind of like health in every way.
Yep. Yeah. And I know from personal experience, when I was coming through, concussions it was almost like a dirty word.
Yeah.
And
I'm just dehydrated.
Yeah,
Nothing's
I'm just
happened.
tired. Just didn't sleep good last night. And I definitely reflecting on my career, you don't kind of notice at the time, but I definitely had some bad concussions that went undiagnosed, and I definitely had some little ones as well. And I'd get into usually sort of come in and do recovery on Sunday, and then you'd have a lift on Monday, and then into training Tuesday, and it'd be like, Thursday afternoon before I started feeling half normal again, and then straight back into a game. So yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about what that means for me down the track, but but I definitely appreciate now, and I'm really happy to see now that there is some people are taking concussions seriously, and coaches now are being held to account, and medical staff are now being held to account, particularly for players who are either look concussed or suspected of concussion. Even to the point in rugby now where referees have discretion to send someone off if they think they're concussed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think even now with football, like, as soon as someone knocks heads, the ref has to stop the game. And if on both sides, if the ref doesn't actually stop, like, you see players going nuts just because it's like, you actually have to stop the game. So I think we had that recently in Asian Cup or something like that, and we were just like, you have to stop the game. And it's nice to see, like, all sports are now taking it a lot more seriously. Yeah,
because it has consequences down the track. It's not necessarily what happens. People do get really bad symptoms, nausea, can't sleep, vomiting, all of that. But it's really the consequences that happen, in your 40s and 50s and 60s, when your brain really starts to deteriorate. That and to, as you say, to see referees, sports federations, clubs, everyone get on the same page and really take it seriously is really pleasing.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's the most exciting thing. At least that stuff is starting to become more frequent.
Yeah, and I assume it. I'm not in a high-performance environment as a player anymore, but I assume it translates down, to what you were talking about, to feeling like you can have that conversation with your trainer or with your coach to say, I'm not feeling it today, I'm not 100%, let's do something else, or let's have a rest day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think even into that is, going into, like, mental health and everything. It's starting to get way more traction in that it is okay to kind of, like, have a break as well. So... it's almost for the bet. Like, it's Simone Biles and Osaka.
Yeah, and throw Ash Barty. We talked about her earlier, but throw her in there as well. And I see now lots of teams are working with mental performance coaches or mental skills coaches, which I think is really, really exciting, because it's I've had a couple of discussions with one here in Canberra, and he says the stuff we talk about it's not groundbreaking. It's just understanding how the brain processes stress and anxiety and how you can utilize that in a positive way. Mm-hmm. It's like, that sounds really simple.
It's so interesting. Like, it's just, it completely, like, changes the game in terms of athletes. If you can, if you're doing physical stuff, and then you start adding mental stuff to it, like, it can take you to another level.
Yeah, and just understanding a little bit about the way your brain works. Because, especially as a young athlete, you're still kind of trying to figure out who you are as a person, but also who you are as an athlete and how you fit into the team environment and into the world more broadly. So if you can give these young guys and young girls some skills to understand the way that their brains work, you're setting them up for success, not just in their sport, but in life.
Mm-hmm. Totally. That's exciting too.
Look, I'm conscious, 50 minutes, so and I guess this isn't going to be the last time we're going to catch up. So Lydia's agreed to become a semi-regular contributor and catch up sort of 3 or 4 times over the next few months. So I think that's a good spot to leave it, and I'll let you get off to bed. It's probably getting late.
Oh yeah, 8:40. Getting into Nana time now. To be honest, everyone's like, "What time do you go to bed?" And now it's like literally, I think we have in a national team, we're like call it the grandmas. We're like 9 o'clock is when we start to wind down.
But honestly, I'm the same. I've got a 7-month-old boy, and he's in bed 7:30, depending on how his naps go during the day. And honestly, by the time he goes to bed, I'm like, I'm I'm cooked.
I'm right there with you.
Time for bed.
Well, that's great things to look forward to. I guess it just kind of like goes earlier and earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So look, thank you so much, Lydia. I really enjoyed this, and
thank you. No, I loved it too.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to some more conversations and delving more deeply into some of the stuff we touched on. So thanks again.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right, there you have it. Thank you so much again, Lydia. If you get an opportunity, go out and buy one of Lydia's books. You can find them online. She's got some links on her social profile. We didn't talk about it there, but she's a children's book author. So if you've got kids, definitely give that a look. Give her a follow. Give her a shout out. And before we go, please make sure you get onto thecover.com.au, subscribe to the newsletter, just bookmark the website. I'm telling you, there's going to be some really interesting stuff. Subscribe to this podcast because Lydia, she's going to feature 3 or 4 times, but there are some really interesting people coming up, some really fascinating conversations that I enjoyed participating in, but hopefully you guys enjoy listening to. A few different perspectives. Certainly, it's not just a sports podcast. I'd like to reiterate that. Sport and rugby is certainly the predominant theme and something that I'll call back to all the time. But, we're going to have some entrepreneurs on here. We're going to have some entrepreneurs who are involved in sport. We're going to have some rappers. We're going to have some artists and producers. So I encourage you, if you like sports, if you like business, if you like pop culture. Everyone likes pop culture, right? Yeah. If you like pop culture, just subscribe because I feel like 2022 is going to be a good year for our content, for this podcast, hopefully for Super Rugby. I think, looking at round 1 was a really good start. I think we can build on that and hopefully create a sustainable long-term professional product in this country. So I'm not going to go on another rant about ghetto law or any of that. I copped a bit of shit about that, so we'll leave that for now. But do yourselves a favour. Subscribe to this. Subscribe to the Daily Dribble podcast. Subscribe to the cover.com.au's newsletter. And thank me later. All right. That is it for this edition of the Cover Podcast Network's Give 'em Liam podcast. That was a mouthful. I apologize. And make sure you check out some of the offers on our website too. The Daily Dribble guys have got an agreement with Manscaped. So if you head to Manscaped, if you head to their website and use the code Dribble20, you'll get 20% off your next purchase from Manscaped. You'll also notice on the website we have some links to Riverside. So if you are listening to me and you think, you know what, I could do what Liam does. I could do it better. Hit that link. Download Riverside. Have a look at it. You actually don't need to download it, but hit that link. Purchase Riverside because it is a one-stop shop for remote broadcasting, remote podcasting, live streaming, whatever. It is a brilliant platform. So hit that link because that will help fund thecover.com.au. Yeah. If you want to start your podcast, hit that link because we get a little kickback from that link. I don't know how much it is, but it's something. So do that. And that's it for this week. I look forward to hearing from some of you. Hopefully we'll get to do a mailbag episode after a few weeks. And that'll be fun. But I look forward to hearing from you all in the week prior to this. And I think you're going to like next week's guest too.